decisions are either 50-50 or 80-20. So it's just like a 50-50 decision is like, what are you gonna have for food today? Like, hey, where does what color does my logo need to be? Like, what does like if you identify 50-50 decisions, you should spend as little time as possible on them, but make a decision, right? Like you need to make the decision, but like don't overbuild conviction for things you don't need to build conviction on. The important ones are 80-20 decisions because you're literally forking your life. This is a big deviation from what we were probably going to do. And I believe we need to go all in here. And I believe that every year there's probably 1 to 2, maybe 3 high conviction 80-20 decisions that founders have to make. And it's really about just making sure that you're consistent.
Hey guys, thanks again for tuning into the Undefeated Underdogs podcast. I'm your host, Sharath. Today I have a special guest, and probably I can say this out loud. He's probably one of the coolest but very ambitious VCs in the town. So I'm very fortunate to get Adam Draper on the podcast. Adam, welcome to the show. How are you feeling today?
Fantastic. Thanks for having me, Sharath. And coolest is always relative. So I won't take too much credit. We always say we invest in the weird things. So it's
to me that's like the coolest, and I feel like that resembles you. I saw Boost VC's website. It's such a sci-fi type, Stanley type of a thing. The way you design the website and your about page and whatnot. But for folks who don't know Adam, which can be rare, let me give you guys like a brief intro. Adam is the co-founder and managing director of Boost VC, a firm that invests heavily in founders building exciting things in the future, right? That's how I put it. Like anything that comes to AI, climate, VR, AR, Web3, everything that counts, that lives in the future. Adam is your guy. He wrote checks in companies like Coinbase and 400 plus startups, and 7 of them were, I think, first or your second checks went to become unicorns. So he has this massive impact on the whole VC industry and tech. And of course, the whole last name Draper is, that sounds like incredible. The Drapers are going, they made so much impact. Like shout out to your pops, William Henry Draper, if I'm not wrong, and Tim Draper, your dad. So shout out to them for introducing you to the world.
Well, venture capital can't get rid of us is how I would put it. We enjoy people too much to stop doing this career, evidently.
Absolutely.
But it just Boost VC, we're the pre-seed fund for deep tech. We invest $500,000 checks. We've been doing it about a decade. And I mean, the way I always think about it is sort of amazing people solving the world's most important problems. Amazing people doing important things, as I say. But other than that, you've got you got it. I've been through. I mean, for the sake of the podcast, like I didn't know I wanted to be a venture capitalist. I have sort of stumbled on this idea of trying to help people do cool things. I grew up with a dad who used to tell us about business models and how fast Skype was growing and like all weird things that our family. And I started a company, and I've tried a lot of things, and a lot of things have failed, but overall I have stumbled forward. And so I sometimes feel which stumbled into I need to give credit to my wife. But that's why I ended up writing. I wrote a book. How and it's a guidebook to venture capital. It's called Breakfast with Pops, and it's because Every 2 weeks for the last 5 years, I have had breakfast with my grandfather at Buck's restaurant in Woodside, California,
Mhm.
and and it's just distilled knowledge passed across some bacon and eggs that has been, I think, very useful to me while
Right.
building out my career. So I think, I mean, 5 years ago, if you think about it, I've been doing it a decade. Half of my life as a venture capitalist, I've been having breakfast with my grandfather. So it's been
Wow.
like an incredibly, and like I used to hang with him every once in a while, but like we set a regimented like calendar item,
Mm.
and I rarely have missed any, and he has rarely missed any for 5 years. So it's, I don't know what number of, let's hear, 26 times five, so 125 breakfasts.
Oh wow, Bucks the restaurant must have been profited a lot.
It's great. I mean, he's been going. I mean, my grandfather's been going there for however many years he has
Right.
existed in California, 60 years, 70 years.
Oh.
Bucks has been his like. You go to Bucks and people go, "Hey, Bill," like everyone just says, "Hey, Bill." Like, it's he's very warm and welcoming, and
Yeah,
can tell sometimes he doesn't recognize the people, and like, but he's met so many people over the course of his time that it's just like he's
of course.
warmly greeted wherever he goes.
Yeah. What a habit that actually like paid off, right? Like your personal habit is actually impacting people like me. I don't. So by the way, I have to confess this. I know you because I follow you on Twitter, and I know your dad Tim because he's been like a legendary VC. But I actually never know your pops. So thanks to you, thanks to your habit that I actually kind of get a glance of who he is and he's like his
What?
thinking and whatnot.
That's actually pretty fascinating that you knew me and then my dad, and then, but because most people it's the opposite, right? It goes pops, my dad, me. So it's
Right.
a fun that I appreciate that.
Yeah. Of course. And let's right off the bat, like I have now that we're all already talking, let's talk a little bit about Boost VC, right? The first thing I want to ask is, I, you have that logo for people who are listening and can see Adam. He's wearing like a Boost VC T-shirt. Why that logo? What is that logo mean to you? Why is that
Oh,
on and off switch?
oh, that's so funny. It's going to be a way worse story than you're hoping for. So
Okay.
you always think like everyone puts a lot of thought into everything that they do,
Right.
and I think the most important thing about startups is that you just make a decision and move forward. And this
Right.
is one of those decisions that we made.
Mm-hmm.
I'll tell two quick things. One is Boost VC was not always a fund. It was originally a crowdfunding website for startups. So
Mm-hmm.
we called it Boost Funder, boostfunder.com. And we
Mm.
were the first crowdfunding website to ever launch for equity on the internet.
Wow.
Um, but we weren't taking transaction fees.
Mm.
Um, and I was working with these two engineers. I had sort of footed the bill. A guy named Alon Gorin and Gorin and an amazing developer. And they sort of built crowdfunding websites, and I was like, hey, we're going to build one for equity, and we're going to, like, I had sort of a very fixed specific vision.
Mm-hmm.
And one day they were in LA, and I flew down to sort of like build with them,
Mm.
and uh, they were like, well, what's the color scheme? And Alon actually has an email for me saying, hey, I'm thinking red, white, and blue. Uh, and he goes, and he said, and I'm like, and which is a funny thing now that we've only done orange for so long.
Right.
And so the next day I'm in town and I'm talking to him, and you search for the word startup in Google,
Right.
and everything just has a power sign, one of these one of these signs.
Oh.
And I was like, hey, okay, logo's been chosen for us. This is easy. Put it in the middle. We were already called Boost. We knew that that was going to be the name, which we
Right.
found with. And then they had put it in red because I had said red, white, and blue, and I said no, I don't like the red. Change it to
Mm.
orange. Let's see what it looks like. It looked awesome. That was it.
That's it.
So
That's.
from then on, I just owned orange. So I used to wear. I mean, I still do most of the time, and I wrote about it in the book.
Mm-hmm.
But orange neon orange pants, and all of mine are ripped, and that's why I'm not wearing them today. But I'm trying to find. So if anyone's out there who has like a pair of 34 orange pants, like a lead on good orange pants, let me know. But orange, I learned. I mean, the idea for this was, hey, we're going to boost the company. We're going to turn them on. We're going to get them
Mhm.
going, right? Like that was the idea. Early stage. This says early stage VC to me. Like that's what
Right.
it means.
Right.
Also, I'm very proud because I have 3 children. They look at this logo and they don't see a computer on switch. They
Mm.
say, oh, it's a Boost logo, wherever it
Yeah.
is. It's on a computer or whatever. And I
That's
go, yeah,
awesome. That's
brainwashing.
that's a cool story right there, right? I bet like every startup has their own version of how they decide and move quickly
Some
on.
people think too hard about it would be my one, and some people probably think less than I did. They probably created a font and they were just like, I like this font, and
Yeah,
you know,
I I recently started a project called Bluebee, and the logo, it's just letters, but the
yeah,
name came from my son, so he calls blueberry as Bluebee.
it's an amazing word. I'm assuming Blooby, but
It's Blubi.
Lubi. Oh, that's good too.
Yeah,
Those
it's
are two
short,
good ways to spell it.
and he says like Bluebee, Bluebee, Bluebee every time we sit for breakfast. I'm like, that's going to be my next project.
To be fair, blueberries are delicious.
For sure. Yeah, I think he agrees with you on that. uh so let's go back to like history of VC, which you wrote in the book. And this is, by the way, this is a great book for people who don't know VC, the LPs, GPs, and basically the nomenclature and everything. I learned a ton. It's so easy to digest. It's such a short book,
Thank
and
you.
it's literally you and your pops talking to me and the readers, right? Like it feels like that. So kudos on that part.
It was designed with that in mind. Well, it was a long, I will say, writing a book is a long journey, and we went through a fair number of iterations. But at the end, I cut a ton out, and I just wanted people to be able to read it. And I think there's some beauty to being able to sit for 40 minutes and read
Hmm.
a book, right? Like I feel like in some ways it's like an innovative format to read a book and have all the information there. Like there are a lot more stories. There are a lot more
Yeah.
things that we've covered just like an insane. I mean, 125 breakfasts, 125 hours worth of like
Yeah, that's a
dialogue.
lot.
Like that's a lot of dialogue. And some things are repeat and whatever, and like, but these were the common themes that I think were really important. So I
And I think it's 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 kind of like it doesn't have that, how do I put this? It doesn't have that authority, right? It's like literally, two people talking and you're like eavesdropping. And
that
you're
that
hearing like,
that's a great way of describing it, and that probably gives me more credit than I'd want. But I love that idea because that would be the goal. Is like you're overhearing us at the breakfast, and like
I literally like I told this to my wife. I was reading, and we were in, this is like a Sunday morning, and I said like, I'm literally sitting in a diner. It feels like that because I always imagine like every line of the book. I imagine orange juice, a plate of eggs and
yeah,
meat, and
it
some bread and some
it
butter.
was a like every once in a while it'd be an obscure order, but like there's a pretty consistent 2 eggs, some pancakes, and bacon, and like my
Right.
grandfather was and then a black coffee. He and I both would have black coffee, and then he'd do something with his.
I
But
love
the
that.
yeah,
Yeah. So let's go back to the history of the whole VC. And as you mentioned in the book, I think you can't miss Draper's name in the whole VC era, right? Like that's the impact that you guys made. And shout out to your great grandfather for like kickstarting the whole thing. In an alternate universe, this is more of like a question to you. What would you do if you were like not part of the Draper family? And what was, I know you mentioned like you wanted to become like a tennis player and you love Australians. But what is something that you do as a builder or a creator?
So for me, I mean, there's a big background to that, but my answer to not okay, not being a part of the Draper family, I still, but I am. So I'll say, like, let's say we're in a different profession, different career.
Hmm.
Like everyone does something different. If I venture capital was not on the table, look, the things I really love are novel ideas
Mm,
and really uh, independent thinkers
mm,
who default to movement is something that we say in the book, but like
mhm,
think people who continue to try things even if the first
mm,
time it doesn't work. Um, I think that the best place to have that intersection is in venture capital, where I get to every day. Uh, if you think about what my day is, it's 9 hours of these amazing founders telling me that there's a problem they're going to solve.
mm,
And if you see that on a scale of like, I'm going to solve climate change, I'm going to solve world finance, I'm going to solve, like, how can you not be optimistic at the end of like months,
mm,
years of this, right? Like, you have to be pretty excited that there's so
mm,
many great people trying to solve the hardest problems. Uh, but that said, I would probably be in the comic book industry, and I think I
mm.
would. I think I'd be very good at it. Um, I think I understand it fairly well, just as an avid reader my whole life. As a collector, I have a good story, but this
Yeah.
comic is my prized possessions that my dad gave me. It's Amazing Spider-Man #1. I do not
Wow.
own. I do not own Amazing Fantasy 15, which is the actual first Spider-Man, which is a great story. My dad and um, I was able to set up a meeting where we got to meet Stan Lee, and
Mm.
we went, and it was one of the most amazing. Stan Lee, who created Spider-Man, Fantastic
Yeah,
Four,
yeah. He's an
um,
incredible creator.
and I basically like got to ask any questions over the course of 2 hours to the guy who basically raised me through comic books,
Mm.
um, and that was really special. That sort of led to me being I'm actually on the board of SkyBound, which actually does create my favorite comic book, which is called Invincible, which
Mhm.
is up there. And yeah, so I'd probably just based off of interest in the fact that I'd be dealing with really interesting people and sort of spreading great ideas and optimism. I think I would be in the comic book industry.
Wow.
Um,
And
yeah.
have you ever thought of like building one like for yourself? I'm just curious. Like a
Dude,
story, did you ever come
Dude,
up with like a
comic books
superhero?
are such a hard medium to
Mm.
express because you not only have to be very, very good. First off, yes, of course. I mean, like I've tried everything from. I even made comics that were like 3 panel comics. Like Calvin and Hobbes, Foxtrot, like that sort of thing. I actually
Mhm.
made some venture capital related strips. If I can find them, I'll share them. But like they weren't very good anyway. Um,
Mm.
you can turn a lot of tweets into like 3 panel strips of a comic book, like a lot of funny tweets
Mm.
into like 3 panel strips. Um, and and then I also I had an idea for a comic that I used to tell she wasn't my wife yet, but my wife about, which was I had an idea for ninja cats. So it was like
Okay.
cats that are ninjas, and they were trying to protect Manhattan, like, which is the I went deep there. So long story short, I have thought long and hard about comic books, what the medium represents. I think it's also a very good analogy to what startups are, which
Mm.
is all comic books are the lowest cost way to develop character driven intellectual property. So most things that you see on television now were driven by comic books, right? Like
Mm.
any of the Marvel superhero things, like everything started with a storyboard of some kind. It's the lowest
Mm.
cost way to create a community around that. I believe startups are the lowest cost way to build product. And so that's it, like in my head, very analogous, and I'm pretty passionate about both. So
Awesome.
yeah.
I think someday I'm hoping that you would like produce your own thing, and maybe my kids will read it. uh,
For now, I'll just I'll learn more about the business side, which is fascinating. And
yeah, for sure.
it did lead me to investments in SkyBound, in Shortboxed, which is another company that sells slabs comic books. So
Hmm.
slab is when it's in a frame and
Hmm.
graded. And I mean, it's, what's interesting is how your long-term interests when
Hmm.
you're a kid will be a business in the future.
Hmm.
Like all those things that you're like that all the geeks geeked
Hmm.
out about. Uh, yeah, I always think collections is sort of
Hmm.
a very human trait, like
Yeah,
collecting things. Like that's a
yeah,
very important part of humanity. And like
absolutely.
I am an excellent collector, so that's probably more my job than anything else.
Awesome. So one thing I want to like pinpointedly observed in the last 20 minutes of our conversation is that you're a storyteller, right? Like you have a story behind every experience, and you kind of like narrated it, right? And we all famously know that founders are great storytellers. And what is something that you as a VC that bring to the table from a storytelling point when you work with founders?
I think it almost so. First off, it's a great question. On the other side, on the coaching, I think there's an interesting way of like how my coaching has changed based off of
Hmm.
storytelling too.
Right.
But what is my sorry? Phrase the question again. Give me
Yeah,
the like
I
more
think
of it.
you're a natural storyteller, right? Like,
Yeah.
how do you bring that quality or skill to the table when you work with your founders, especially portfolio founders or?
It's all about okay, founders are founders. Okay, like I like they are like who they are, and in order to hear your advice, they have to be in a non-defensive uh like mode. I don't know how to describe it. Like they need to trust you. Like they
Hmm.
need to trust that your advice comes from a space because founders are talented.
Hmm.
Like they're getting fed BS left and right by every advisor, every their mom, their dad. I'm not
Right.
calling their mom and dad
Yeah,
BS
yeah,
people,
yeah.
but every single person saying you should do this, you should do this, you
Yeah.
should do this. And so they have to put it through a filter. So the storytelling of venture really comes into being able to relate. I believe this is how I tell it, and I don't know if it's no one's criticized yet, so maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. But being able to tell first person or third person stories. So being able to
Mm.
say, hey, this is why this is an important thing you should consider. And what, because I was a founder, I'm able to say first person, like if they're going through a tough time, I describe all my hardest times. And
Hmm.
then I say, and now we get to find out if you actually want to do this. And like, so, figure it out. And like, that's like one of my conversations I have. So I'd say storytelling comes through in mostly in conversation and advice through your own, like what you have done. And so like where the person respects you the most. And
Mm.
so I'm, by the way, there are a lot of things that I give advice on that I probably shouldn't, but I'm a venture capitalist and I can't stop giving advice. But
Right.
but there are a lot of things that I actually think I'm asymmetrically good at, and a lot of those things come when it's around mindset and when people are down. I'm very useful, is because I can get them back. I can get them back locked
Mm.
in, make them understand, like genuinely pull them out and understand. Like a lot of people go through this, you're going to be back on it, and if you need anything, like we're here. And then I spend time on it, and then sometimes it works, and that's probably the places where I find myself most useful. Otherwise, just general brainstorming, like a lot of people think there's only an A and a B
Hmm.
door, And like, if you can say, well, there's C, D, and E, and you can
Mm.
try any of those, and we can help that. Um, but storytelling, I was just talking to my partner, Maddie Callender, about this, and I mean, we were just emphasizing like good storytellers fundraise better, they sell better.
Yeah.
They like, it's such an, especially in the deep tech spaces that we're in,
Right.
you can sort of get away with that storytelling in certain SaaS businesses and certain like not like I believe SaaS businesses is a business model. It's important, and but all you have to do is show metrics. You show
Right.
metrics, like that's the story. Like,
Right.
people translate that story. That's an easy story to tell.
Right.
But in deep tech, where someone's building like a rocket ship, it's
Mm.
like it's 4 years before you have a prototype. Like, talk
Mm.
about having to be a good storyteller, right? Like, you
Mm.
need to be able to capture the interest of people, and paint the like, evoke the imagination,
Right.
while also being rational about the business model,
Right.
and like understanding where that money's going to be coming from.
Right.
And so, your question is a very good question, because storytelling is a big part of the entrepreneur journey, but it's
Yep.
also a big part of coaching with venture. And
Yeah, because I
also,
think
I have to fundraise, so I have to be an okay storyteller. Although I will say, I don't think I was particular. I have been as good as I could be at storytelling and fundraising.
no, I think you're being very modest, but no, the reason is it's typically all of us. Just like the notion is, founders should be like storytellers, right? And VCs pump money, and they kind of like advise on a need to need basis. But I think that's why I was like covering why you like think storytelling is such an important aspect.
Oh, it's an interesting question, because we have to storytell all the time.
Yeah.
Like, I have to build credibility. I need the founder to understand that I have something I can give them, right? Like, we used to, dude, when we started Boost VC, we had zero credibility. We
Hmm.
had zero reason for any founder to believe what we were
Right.
doing. And so I had to sell. I was selling, and we didn't have much money. We were investing $10,000 per deal. And so I
Mm.
would go in and I'd be like,
Wow.
this is why you should take my $10,000. And like,
Right.
I would be like, network. And like, I'd be like, just throwing everything at the wall. And, I'm sure some of those companies had alternatives, but most of them this was the first time they'd ever heard of the word venture capital. So I had a shot.
Right.
And then slowly, once you do one deal, you can do two. Once you do two,
Right.
you can do four.
It
Once you do,
compounds. Yeah.
and
And
then, you wake up a decade later, you've done 450 deals, and like,
wow.
yeah, and
It's
you feel like you've seen a lot. Like, I can say, I
yeah.
still get surprised probably twice a year, but like, in general, which, bad surprises, good surprises, like, both happen every year.
Yeah, I'm sure. I think even your passion towards like the superheroes and that story like building really helps founders as well. But I have a follow-up question on that front. What is the non-obvious way or non-obvious help founders seek from you? Like, usually people ask for networking. Like founders, they seek VCs for networking, general advice, how to fundraise, how to grow, how to hire. But apart from those, what are some unobvious, things founders seek you in your like 11 plus years of experience?
So the non-obvious things, I think that the biggest non-obvious thing is actually the most obvious, which is they just need someone to talk to. And
Mm.
I can be there for that, right? Like, I'm there
Mm.
to help them get to wherever they're going. We're already in. We're in the same ship. We're trying
Mm.
to make the ship work. We're throwing ideas at the wall, and sometimes they just need someone to listen to them.
Mm.
Look, when a founder, I'd say one of the things that's coming back into style, which I like a lot, is like, I do think founders are starting to look for real partnership with their
Mhm.
venture capitalists. They're looking for, is this the right fit, not does this person
Mhm.
have the most money.
Mm.
And I think that that's a very exciting phase where you start to see real legendary partnerships start to form
Right.
in those moments. And in that, it's sort of like, hey, have you historically been a shoulder to cry on, like with other
Mm.
founders? We've been there in the hardest times of a founder.
Mm.
And I think that that's, although, the founders are, we're under no guise that a big part of what gets the founder in the door is the fact that we're investing money, right? Like
Mhm.
they need money to accomplish what they want to do. We happen to have raised some money. But then they're also filtering based off of like, do they have experience in this? Are they actually interested in this? Like, there are a couple ways in which they're filtering, and like we feel that we're very good at giving a network, which is the community of other peers who are at the
Mhm.
same stage in different industries.
Right.
Um, we're good at holding companies accountable, which sounds super unsexy, but
Mm.
is super valuable.
Yeah.
And then we're I guess good at investing capital into the companies. And like those are sort of the three things that we primarily focus on, is just sort of like
Mm.
the startups are customer, right? Like whenever we find a gap that they need, we try to fill that gap. And
Mm.
all startups have different gaps at different times. That's sort of the beauty of this industry, is like I can't be bored. Like
Mm.
there's no there is always something that we can be digging into with a company that we can be helping
Right.
with. And so we
Right.
try to help as much as we can. But we're also not there. The relationship with the venture capitalist is like, I'm not there to, like, if I'm overstepping, it's not
Mhm.
good.
Mm.
And so you have to have this very nice balance where you're like, hey, I
Balance.
trust you. This is what I think. Now go for it. And so I
Right.
would say the non-obvious thing is really just being
Listening.
able to listen and then give feedback is sort of this like beautiful. I don't
Yeah.
know. I've become just over the last decade incredible friends with some of the founders we backed. Like,
Mm.
and now I've known them for more than a decade. Like I've known
Right.
these people, and I've backed the first thing, and then the second thing, and then the third thing, and it's just like one of these things where I'm just like,
Right.
hey, I know they're gonna hit. Like maybe I miss on one or two, but I know that they have it in them to win. And like that's like I love being sort of those are the relationships you try to build. We're
Right.
not to ramble, but like one of the things that's Ho Nam from Altos Ventures, who's an incredible investor in my opinion. Um, he always says like early stage venture capital is a discovery engine, and I think that his intention is it's a discovery engine to figure out which companies are going to work. I think it's a
Mhm.
discovery engine to figure out who you're the best partner with. Like, and
Ah,
you figure based off of the deck of cards that you've dealt and
right.
invested in, trying to
I
figure
love that.
out like who the best
I love
is.
that. Couple of things you mentioned. One is I want to definitely unpack the whole partnership thing, because I think as as I'm on the other side, which is more like on a builder founder side, and I talk
Yeah,
to a lot of founders. One thing I observed, which to your point, is that founders are handpicking investors. uh, it's basically, it used to be like the other way, right? Like, uh, investors pick founders, and I think it still happens, right? Investors pick founders, of course. That's like,
it goes both ways. It's
yeah,
like
both ways, right? So I think
I
that's
think pendulum than it is a like now then this founder thing. But yeah,
true. Yeah, and I think it's the partnership, that the bond that I think people are looking for, the friendships, like you said. And you mentioned in the book, which I really love, you dedicated a whole chapter for people. And I truly believe in that as well. Uh, when you when you choose to play long term, you have to like rely on people, not anything else, more than anything else, right? So one question which I actually kind of, you know you accidentally stumbled on this one. So I'm reading this book by Steve Jobs, Make Something Wonderful, the whole Steve Jobs archive. They published this free book. And in one of the pages, this caught my attention, which is he really emphasizes on recruiting. And he says we are recruiting people who tell us what to do, not the other way around. It's not like we tell something that they do and they will do. Those are not the right folks. The A players are the ones who tell us what to do as a company. So my question to you, which is also about partnerships, when you look into founders like who you want to invest in, do you think, or do you have that recruitment hat, like, hey, these are the folks I'm going to bring into Boost VC, which will not only help build my own portfolio but to help the fellow other startups and other founders, right? Like, what are some things that you kind of look into when you go through like founders persona?
Yeah. So I talk about it a little bit in the book because I think my grandfather just nails this on in his like how his framework of looking at people. He says high commitment, high
Yep.
energy, high integrity. Those are his
Right.
three. I say authenticity. Integrity is important, but
Yep.
obviously. But those are things that are difficult to filter for. And so what you're trying to figure out is, do they have a genuine obsession with what they're trying to accomplish, right? Like, are they
Mm,
genuinely committed to the fact that they themselves have the ability to solve this, and they
mm,
have a good enough, like, compass that they'll do it. They will work their hardest.
mm-hmm.
Um, I There's something about blindly optimistic people that is very attractive also. And then like it's just sometimes I get sucked into the blind optimist and it's difficult for them to like be tethered and they sort of need a partner. This is
Right.
why my me and my partner work so well. I'm very much the drifting off into the space and he's very much tethering us into like, hey, this is
Right.
what this means. Um, and yeah, Brayden and I have had a partnership of 10 years now, and it's been
Mm-hmm.
going great. I, and then, a part of my job, a lot of founders hate the way I interview. Okay. Like I've had people get very, very, uh, like sort of upset
Mm,
because I don't really ask about the business. Because if it's gotten to me in some capacity, like I'm I know it's a big idea.
mm-hmm.
I've figured out the one liner and I
Mm-hmm.
generally know how they're attacking it. What I care about is whether or not they have a novel way of thinking about things. And like, do they have a symmetric ability to solve this specific problem? And
Mm.
it's I have favorite questions I ask. Now I'm going to have to change them at some point because like those favorite questions, I think it's become a target now where people actually are prepared for them.
Right.
Um, but one of my favorites is like, what's the thing you're most proud of that you accomplished before the age of 20?
Mm.
And like, if you've been in a career for more than 3 years, all of a sudden the statute of limitations is worn off, and you're like, I ran a fake ID ring, and when I was 16, I did like I hacked the school computers or whatever. Those are the like sort of on the taboo side that they've done.
Right.
But on the good side, it's like I was the first person in my whole family to ever go to college. I was
Mm.
what I'm trying to do by being a question asker, which is what venture sort of supposed to be. I like
Mm-hmm.
a conversation, but like my job is asking questions.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I'm trying to like I want the question, and I'm sure as a podcaster you think about this too.
Yeah.
What's the question that gets me to the answer faster? Right? Like, how
Mm.
do I get them to be their authentic selves as
Yep.
fast as I can? And sometimes, and all the time, you have to get them off script. Like
Right. Yep.
that's their that you need them not on script. If they're on script, it's
Yep.
boring AF. It is like I don't like my 15 to 20-minute conversations. Like
Right.
you're on script. I'm like, hey, anyone can recite
Yeah.
CAC numbers.
Yeah.
Like anyone you have. And now in the world of Zoom, like everyone has their like I can tell if you have a PowerPoint in front of you and you're just like clicking and telling me what it is. Like
Right.
that isn't telling me anything about you. Like
Right.
what are the hard problems you've solved? What have you gone through? Like those are the things that I'm trying to figure out. And
Mm.
I'm not trying to overstep and like learn too much about someone, but
Mm-hmm.
like I need to know what they're genuinely like excited
Mm-hmm.
about. Like
Mm-hmm.
what triggers them. And like it's okay, and it's okay if they get mad at my questioning. Like I actually sometimes love being challenged, and like I very much consider backing founders who are like feeling a little more. I want them to be committed, like own this,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like this thing. Um, I also need to like feel, yeah, I can learn something. Like I want to learn something from the founders, and I want it to be a good partnership long term. So like I am
Right.
looking for qualities that where it's like, hey, I feel I can learn a lot from this. I
Mm.
will learn a lot about this industry, and this, this. But even that, like, I just want really our qualifier at Boost VC is like, hey, is this, um, like, our job is championing human endeavor, and it's where are the people where are the greatest people solving the hardest problems in the world, the most important problems in the world, and it's just about like getting in front of them, figuring out
Mm-hmm.
whether or not their problem like we feel needs to be solved today
Mm.
versus later. And then sometimes we're able to participate, and like
Right.
it's one in a many, but it's not uh it's yeah, it's right now it's like 25 deals a year.
Wow. Yeah, I think your answer is so authentic that, I feel like you're trying to like really explain how you prep for a founder meeting, right? You
Yeah.
kind of, you just
I just
like,
want it's really just about it's like how do they react? It's like trying to figure out like can they do this? Can they
right.
um and some and even preparedness it doesn't bother me. Them being late to the meeting doesn't bother me because I'm late to some meetings and I shouldn't be
Mm-hmm.
bothered by that. It's more just about like, hey, have they thought interesting thoughts? Like
Mm.
I think that people who think interesting thoughts build pretty interesting companies. And like
Mm.
you're able
Yep.
to tell me something I've never heard before, and I have to get confused or I laugh at it or like I
Mm.
get a little like triggered by it. Like I need to dig in because that's a big deal, whatever that thing is.
Right.
I'm like I've learned that there's a difference between being high conviction and stubborn. And
Mm.
you want to be high conviction, you do not want to be stubborn. You miss when you're stubborn.
Mm.
Um,
I
you
love that.
overlook something. That doesn't mean that you won't hit some, but being stubborn is about being right. And in
Mm.
our business, it's not about being right. It's about
Yeah.
like trying to create the best opportunity for someone to succeed.
Right.
Sometimes you get right, sometimes you're
Yep.
not. But a big part of my book, I write about it in the book, is luck. Like
Yeah.
you you never want to blame. You never want when you're lucky. You don't want to think you were smart, and when you're smart, you don't want to think you were lucky. And you just need some sort of like happy blend. I don't know what the word is for it, but it's sort of like the whatever that is. You just need to be
Yeah.
like, hey, I'm still working hard so that I can get lucky, but you don't want to get overconfident. And like you
Yeah.
just need to know that like, hey, that day the dice fell in your favor.
I love that. Speaking about conviction, how do you like push founders to like build and develop conviction? Like if they lack, for example, if you see a founder who's struggling, they do have like good knack for product, they have good knack for market growth,
Yeah.
they figured everything out, but the intangible piece is belief, conviction. Belief, I think, most founders have the conviction that they play for long and they will forever, like for at any cost they will do it. Like, how do you push them to like build conviction?
So I think everyone has their own way. I never want to enforce my specific way
Mhm.
on anyone because I'm actually unsure what mine is, other than like all of a sudden I feel very strongly about whatever the thing is.
Right.
Um, and I've built it in weird ways before that I've like it's just um, but when I'm talking to someone, so first off, founders who hedge, and by hedging, I mean like, hey, we're building like a consumer product and we're
Hmm.
trying to sell to the enterprise. You don't have enough effing money to do both
Mm.
of those things. You can't. You can't do
Mm.
it. You can't straddle both. You have to commit. And
Hmm.
so I'd say every year, every founder has probably 1 to 3. And Mike, I'm going to give Mike Maples full
Mm-hmm.
credit for the from Floodgate.
Mm-hmm.
He said it. Decisions are either. I'm going to butcher his quote, but it's like, this is how I think of it. Decisions are either 50-50 or 80-20. So it's just
Mm.
like a 50-50 decision is like, what are you going to have for food today? Like, hey, where does what color does my logo need to be? Like, what
Right.
does, like, if you identify 50-50 decisions, you should spend as little time as possible on them, but make a decision, right? Like, you need
Right.
to make the decision, but like, don't overbuild conviction for things you don't need to build conviction on. The
Right.
important ones are 80-20 decisions because you're literally forking your life. You don't, it is a, this is a big deviation from what we were probably going to do. And I believe we need to go all in here. And I believe that every year there's probably 1 to 2, maybe 3 high conviction 80-20 decisions that founders have to make.
Mm.
And it's really about just making sure that you're consistent. And
Mm.
we go through 3 a year would be a lot. It's probably more like genuinely most things are 50-50. It's like it's not that. But 80-20 Boost VC, we've been through a few of them. Like
Right.
we've been wrong. I think the most important thing about a decision is to make it. Like
Right.
it's
Mm-hmm.
I went high conviction on adding virtual reality when we were a Bitcoin focused accelerator. And like that sort of broke the idea of what we were to everyone. And then eventually we were able to build up to this idea of deep tech, which was a big deal. Like now that we've solidified as a pre-seed deep tech fund, like I feel like people know who we are again.
Mm-hmm.
It's easier to translate to other people. There's a community of us. Like, but for a long time, it was, we were never going to only be Bitcoin and crypto. In some ways, it would have been easier in life
Mm-hmm.
if I had been fixated on the fact that there were other entrepreneurs building with different technologies that were going to be like productive in the world. Um, but that steady evolution actually made us a better team over the long
Right.
run. Like we became better at understanding how to deploy in different technologies, how to recruit in different technologies, like all those things built the organization we have today. And so, yeah, that would be, your question was very focused on like how do you help someone build that conviction? It's really just about them making the call and giving them a time frame to make the call. And it's
Right.
basically like all I can do is give them as much information on what I would do or
Mm-hmm.
what I've seen happen as possible, and them translate it to themselves and be like, hey, because
Mm.
founders are the market master, right? Like you're obsessed with whatever you're doing way more than
Right.
I'll ever.
Yeah.
Like if I know more about your industry than you do, like
Mm.
I should probably do your thing, right? Like I should probably start the company, not back it.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
so like my job is just to say like, hey, I do understand what you're going through right now.
Mm.
These are the things you need to think about. But the most important thing is just to make a decision and stick with it and own it. And like, I think a lot of people still try to hedge. This
Mm.
is the thing that kills most companies, hedging on hard decisions because they want to keep a door open, and the
Mm.
open doors they need to be closed for focus. And
Mm.
you can't maintain an, I mean, I already used this example, but like an enterprise business and a consumer business, like
Mm.
at the stage of an early stage startup, they're two different customers. It's just impossible. Like you can't do
Right.
it because you run out of money. Like
Mm.
enterprises, the hardest conversations I have are when a founder goes, in 6 months we'll be able to sell to Sony or like one of these big
Mm-hmm.
conglomerate companies. I'm just like, God, you're gonna die in 6 months because they're gonna push it another 3. They have all the time in the world, and you have
Right.
8 months of money, and
Mm.
like you have to figure it out at that time. So
Right.
figure it out. They are not your customer. Figure out who is, and
Right.
like that's when I wish founders would listen to me because that would be helpful. But
Yeah.
that doesn't always happen.
Yeah. So I think both of your answers, even before you were talking about like these founders seek like uh, a shoulder, to cry on, or someone to listen. And even now, you're kind of helping them to like, if a founder is a horse, your job as a VC is to like, bring them to the lake. And it's up to them to like drink or not,
Oh
right?
yeah,
Like,
no, yeah, completely,
yeah,
dude.
and
And our job is not to criticize, right?
yeah,
Like it's hey, we're behind. It's literally to blindly support,
yeah,
like for just being like, hey, we trust
yeah.
you are making the best decision with the information you have on hand, and I trust your decision making. Like that's what we're trying to say.
And is that why in the book you mentioned that VC is a service job, right? It's more of like you're serving the founders. So talk to me about that whole philosophy. Is that something that you borrowed from pops or your dad? Like, how did you
I,
inculcate in
I
Boost
think
VC?
that was more experience. I realized over time there's this. I think there's a dichotomy between what people believe venture capital is and what it
Mhm.
actually is, right? And it's more of a gravitas concept than anything else, and it is not like the glamorous. All your calls, you're getting either "Hey, we did well" calls or "Shit hit the fan" calls. Sorry, I should swear.
No, that's
Um,
fine. That's fine. You
But
can.
like those are the two types of like you get the bookends, right? And you have to
Right.
figure out what type of call is coming in on any given day and figure out where you are best useful. I mean, all people, it has nothing to do with venture capital. Like we want to be useful, right? Like
Mhm.
I'm trying to put myself in a position where I'm the most useful to the most people.
Mm.
And in venture, that's what we are. Like I go and I do have an affinity. One other thing about being in deep tech is I don't know why I put quotes, but the one of the other thing is there's no one who's like an expert on deep tech, so it's way easier to build a brand in it. Like,
Mm. Yeah.
so that's useful too. Like I keep going into these industries where no one really understands and just sort of like being obsessed with them. I get to
Right.
I don't understand it better than anyone else, but like if I get there faster, I at least get to have a little thought leadership.
Right.
Um, yeah, dude, venture is a service industry. There's no way around this. Like, and I think if you listen to even the greatest, all of the best VCs over the history of 70 years of real venture capital, there's other venture capital over
Mm-hmm.
time
Yeah.
that I
Just like
about
startup
in
venture
the book.
capitals. Yeah.
But like what we believe is venture capital, everyone just they talk about it and they know that the startups are the hero, right? Like the
Mm.
startup is the one who's literally a sorcerer or sorceress willing something into existence. It I think that the average human doesn't understand how difficult that is. Like
Mm.
how incredibly excruciatingly like uh lonely that
Mm.
process is. And I think venture capitalists, if you empathize with that struggle, you become better at your job because your job doesn't become about criticizing what they're doing wrong. It becomes about supporting what they're doing right. And I think that that's all that everyone needs in this.
Mm.
It's, hey, what's the best option we have on hand right now with the cash in the bank and the team we have? Like, is it, hey, you're doing something that you can't do and you
Mm.
have to completely change the business idea? Some of my best businesses were like I invested in a future social network, which to me doesn't make any sense now. Like that I don't know why I wrote that check, honestly. And it then changed to a dating website, and then it
Mm.
changed to a video streaming uh, for mobile, and then it changed to a remittance company. The remittance company is the one that went gangbusters and just like absolutely
Wow.
um, but yeah, it's called Wave Mobile Money, and it's an incredible business.
Mm.
And so like you never know, and so you just want to be able to help the companies at these intersections of like, hey,
Mhm.
make the decision. Like here's where I believe the conviction is: make the decision. And it's really about unlocking their own head than it is about you like helping yourself. And And
Love
I
that.
think that makes you a better VC. Like empathize with the struggle, empathize with how hard it is. And
Right.
once you've gotten past that, I wrote about this in the book also, and I shouldn't just quote things from the book, but I wrote, there's a great guy named Schultz. I forget his first name. Charles. No, Charles Schultz did Peanuts.
True.
The other Schultz, and he said on his 100th birthday, he wrote a 13-page book, which gave me the idea to write shorter books, by the way.
Mm.
And on his 100th birthday, he wrote, "It's trust is the coin of the realm." And I recommend reading this if you ever want to, because it's 100 years of a great man's life
Mm.
in 13 pages. And
Mm.
what he's basically saying is whenever trust was highest, magic happened. And
Mm.
that's what you're trying to do as a venture capitalist. You're trying to figure out where trust can be highest, where you can give more. Sometimes it's
Yeah.
storytelling, right? Like
Right.
sometimes it's money showing that you're willing to give up more of yourself. Sometimes it's sometimes it's just time. And
Right.
so the service of these things is the most important part of building a career in venture capital.
Right.
And that's really what I tried to show people in the book is like, I think that some people perceive venture capital as like an elite establishment of, there's a weird aura around it, right? It, let me tell you, founding a venture fund is, I think, equivalent to founding a startup. It is difficult.
Mm-hmm.
You go through tough times. You're not being paid that much, but there's asymmetric return, just like with a startup.
Yeah.
Like if you do it well. But my job is championing human endeavor. The startup is my customer. I have to figure out how to earn future value off of that,
Right.
because I'm definitely not getting paid today on it. And
Yeah.
so that was a good question.
Yeah. And by the way, it's George Schultz. I just like,
George Schultz. Yeah, I knew it. It wasn't Charles Schultz. George.
I
I know
literally
it.
like,
Sorry, George. Forgot. Yeah.
yeah, I actually kind of did the same thing, like underlined the whole thing. Uh,
Thank you.
so, one question before we kind of dive into the whole VC, like predominantly VC topics. What are some common mistakes that you observe in early stage founders that they do knowingly or unknowingly?
Mistakes. I mean, I'd
Mistakes.
say what I mentioned was the hedging, where
Hmm.
they think
Yeah.
doors can stay open. That is the single most popular mistake I see. Like
Mm.
it's a deviate, and at some point, it all falls under the emblem of focus,
Right.
and understanding who your customer is. In order to build something people want, you need to know who your customer is that you're building for,
Okay.
and you need to shut doors, not open. It's about isolating the focus and knowing that there are a lot of that person out there. And
Right.
most people keep all these doors open, thinking, "Oh, we're generating 10% of our revenue from there, but 80% of your time is there."
Mm.
Like, just the amount of people who don't understand the value of that time is the hard
And
part,
yeah.
where it's like, hey, oh, you're fielding. So I always say startups undervalue their pricing, so they underprice themselves by about 4x most of the time.
Mm.
Um,
Okay.
and like all you have to do is multiply your know who your customer is, multiply it by 4, and if you do that, and 25% of people stay, you will build a better product for those 25% of people,
Mm.
because all of a sudden you don't have to service the other 75% of people, and they already bought in and they're paying. And like
Mm.
that's what building that's with the Spencer Skates from Amplitude. He gave just an amazing talk at Boost VC once, where he said, "I used to think that scale in a startup meant
Mm-hmm.
more customers, more money, more, just more, more, more." And he said, "I never really understood that scaling meant reinventing myself every 24 months. And
Mm,
so it's reinventing the company because your customer has evolved. You've
mm,
realized that there's an obsessive customer every 2 years, and you try to service everyone, but like your focus becomes this. And
mm.
so that's why things grow in the enterprise from like uh, smaller companies to mid-stage companies to the enterprise companies. Like that's always the steady. No one starts at the enterprise. No one.
Right. Yeah.
I've
That's
I've yet to see anyone in their first 2 years close an enterprise
right.
contract and them care about it. So you could get a pilot, you could get and this is, I'm 10, 12 years in. I'm not. I've
Yeah.
seen
Yeah.
now. Um, that's not fully true. No, that's 7 years in. It's true. Like, and so just find someone who's receptive. Your goal as a founder needs to be to increase the velocity of your feedback loop with your customer. And
Mm.
so if money is not increasing, increase the feedback loop with the customer and you'll build a better product. Like they'll become reliant on you so much faster. You build a better product.
Yeah.
Sorry. So that's the most common thing is
Yeah.
deviation. It's a non-commitment to a very specific thing. To the most, uh, I mean, I'd say the best thing founders do in those situations, they just go bold and they go hard.
Right. Yeah. I love that. I love what you said about if you're not building revenue or not getting the money you want, double down on the feedback because you build a better product, which will eventually turn more customers in because,
More customers, more money, and that probably means that you just haven't figured out the funnel to find new customers,
yeah,
not because.
you
So,
don't have money. Yeah. Love
startup
that.
is just a series of solving one problem in front of the other. What's your most gaping problem? Solve that.
Yeah.
Oh, you're not in front of a customer? Get in front of a customer. Oh, that customer hasn't paid you? Figure out how to get them to pay you. Like, it's like one, and
Iterative.
everyone thinks it's everything all at once. And it's really just reorienting the whole team and company around one thing at a time.
Yeah. And it's also illogical for someone who just launched an MVP or their first version to target an enterprise customer because
Uh,
there is no credibility, there is no stability for the product, there is
and they've
no
wasted
use cases
and they
figured out.
waste so much time and
Yeah.
hope. They lose hope. They
And
lose. That's the
confidence.
thing you lose. Hope powers us, and like
Right.
if you spend your hope incorrectly, it's misguided hope.
Yeah.
And like not to be very harsh on this, but don't do that.
Yeah.
If
Yeah.
anyone don't don't go to a Fortune 500 customer and be like, oh, they promised a pilot in 3 months. Like, just don't do it.
Yeah.
Go to the smaller customers who aren't going to pay as much and get deliver something. Deliver something that's
It's
valuable.
it's exactly how Apple did their business too, right? Like they sold like 99 cents song on iTunes. That's
Yeah.
that's like pretty, pretty okay, right? Like for at that
Oh,
time.
before that, their first product was the Apple One, which was just it was a tinkerer's computer board. Like
Yeah.
it wasn't high end. It wasn't all together. And they learned from that. They were able to sell enough of those that they learned, hey, everyone wants it all together. Let's put it all together. Like
Yeah.
solve the problem that's in
That's in
front of you.
front of
Like
you.
they did
Yeah.
it. They have a very linear way of looking at building products.
And yeah, love that. So couple of questions which are kind of like, something I'm asking personally for myself. How should one founder pitch you? Pitch to Adam or Boost VC. What is like that thing that you look for when someone's pitching an idea or their startup?
I mean, again, it's like good energy. Storytelling is useful. I've never thought of it in that way, but it's like, tell me a compelling story about why this is the thing you're doing, like
Hmm.
why this fits. I have to make the connection that like you're a good fit for whatever
Right.
this thing is.
Right.
Um, or I need to I need to assume that you're just like very confident in your own self
Hmm.
that you will be able to accomplish it. And like I believe that thing is very important. Um, I think I think everyone, the storytelling way of doing it, I always think, okay, our mission at Boost VC is to accelerate the sci-fi future. And
Mhm.
so we're building the epicenter of deep tech, right? So
Mhm.
we're trying to build the destination for all deep tech founders and in order to do that, we have a fund to
Mhm.
invest in deep tech companies, and we have a demo day product in order to
Mhm.
help startups get connected to other investors. And like suddenly you have a very clear image about like
Mhm.
where I'm trying to go and then what I have today in order to get there, right?
Mm.
And I think that all companies have the problem people go into when they're storytelling is they try to put everything in the one liner rather than separating the idea of their mission and their product.
Mm.
And so they try to be like, we're solving climate change rocket engines. I don't know. They blindly put everything into like a clump of words rather
Right.
than saying like, okay, Coinbase. The first time he ever pitched me, Brian Armstrong said, at some
Mhm.
point the world will be on one financial infrastructure.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
that was it. That was his guiding light. That was his very
Mhm.
specific like star
That's
in the
his
darkness.
North Star. Yeah.
And then, what his product was it was just a digital currency exchange. It was, and actually, easiest way to buy Bitcoin. It wasn't even an exchange. It was just
Mm.
7 years. Easiest way to buy Bitcoin was his product.
Mm.
And that was his product to get to one. And then as you build, and as long as you have a guiding light and you're building the product and servicing the customer, there are these moments in time where the wind's at your back. And if you allow it for it, you will know exactly what your customer needs in
Mm.
order to continue on that path. And sometimes
Mm.
the customer evolves a little bit, sometimes it moves. That's where the like a great mission driven CEO can listen to the wins and
Mm.
like know what the product is that you need at that time. But most of the time it's just throwing stuff at a board and trying hard to help your customer.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like I it's like that I've yet to see someone work smarter, uh, but I have seen success work harder. Like
Mm.
that's sort of the
I
general
love
like
that.
it's I have yet to see anyone outsmart the work of starting a business.
Mm.
But every time we've had a successful business, let me tell you, they worked hard.
They work, yeah. Hard work, it's so underrated. If everybody wants to, like, put less effort in, it's like minimum effort, maximum output, right? Like that won't work, at least in startups.
Completely.
Yeah.
Completely. Well, it's because you want to get there faster, and I understand it, right? Like I understand
Yes.
that, and so you have to fall in love with. This is why your mission becomes so important. Because
Mhm.
if you don't have that guiding light, if you don't have Brian Armstrong pointing to the fences and saying like, "Hey, one financial infrastructure for the planet," if you don't have me saying, "I'm," even for me, like me saying, "Hey, I'm trying to accelerate the sci-fi future. Like this
Mhm.
is my guiding light, my direction." Like you might you might get more distracted, you might think everything's a possibility rather
Mm.
than saying like, hey, this does get our customer closer to accelerating this development, right? Like this is we've figured out how to build a business, but like, is there another product that we need that services them better? Or, hey, our fund product works, but like maybe they need more money,
Mm.
or less money, or, more deals or less deals, like it's that sort of thing. You have to
Right.
figure out how to, like, the belief you have to have in me is basically, you have to believe that I am genuinely trying to create the epicenter of deep tech to accelerate the sci fi future.
Mm.
If you believe that, you believe that all my decisions are going to be towards this. So
Mm.
every single decision I'm making, whether it's my fund, hiring, whatever the thing is, whatever I'm building at the time, like it's headed towards that. It's
Right.
not about my fund. My
Right.
fund is part of that, right? Like
Right.
it's not
It's
the,
bigger
the,
than
the
that.
it's but all of a sudden I have movement. And that's
Mm.
the important part. So what I was trying to get at is like the part of storytelling people don't quite land a lot of the time is show me movement. Show
Mhm.
me that you've tried everything in the direction of that, right?
Mm.
Show me that you've gone for it and just attempted things and just gone. I want
Right.
what we say is default movement. We always say default movement. Like our favorite founders, it's not that there's new money every time we talk to them. It's not that there's new, but they have tried something and learned something every time we talk to them.
Right.
So that's my favorite thing is like,
I love
we
that.
thought this, it didn't work, but it turns out this is important.
Right.
Like that conversation, me hearing that, my ears ring when someone says, "Oh, but we learned." Like
Mm.
that's that, and I go, "Okay, that's currency. That's money in the bank." Like in my
Mm.
head, that's them building trust with me. Where
Mm.
trust with them is being with them when they're down, and like, so it's we're exchanging verbal currency throughout all
Yeah.
the days.
Wow, I love that. Oh my God, there is so much I think founders can get from this talk. I thought like I'm having a conversation about you about VC, but it turned out like we're heavily focusing on the founder side, which is so valuable to me because I want to be like that person. So I'm quite
Well,
literally asking questions for myself in a way.
you're guiding us, so this is great. I mean, I hope it's useful, and
Yeah, for sure.
I genuinely love talking about this because first off, like the greatest thing about podcasts and blogs and like all this stuff is like I've spent 12 years, and other than that, I've spent my whole life talking about deals,
Hmm.
right? I mean, I was raised on deals. I mean, whether it's Monopoly, chess,
Yeah.
Risk, whatever the thing is, making deals.
Right.
Um, and like I genuinely believe that in order to accelerate the sci-fi future, I have to be open and get more people involved in that,
Mm.
right? Like I have to
Yeah.
inspire more VCs to
Right.
invest. I have to inspire more companies to start. And like
Right.
if me being open, the thesis, so that again, like back to solving the problem at hand, I want more people to do it. Like more
Mm.
people need to know that this is a potential career, right? Like
Mm.
that's just educating it. So
Yeah.
open sourcing VC, I said it like 2 weeks ago. I don't know exactly what it means, but it feels like a thing. So I'm going to start
Mm.
just, I'm trying to give it all away so that people can modify and
I
make it
think you
better.
should. I think you guys should start like a podcast where you talk about these things in a much open way, right? Like there are less VCs that do that, like openly talk about deals, openly talk about misses or the failures or
Actually, that'd be
something.
interesting. Almost like a chapter by chapter.
Yeah.
It's, hey, today we're going to talk about this, like like literally boring. It's like boring. I could call it boring stuff, like the legal stuff that I've had to do
Exactly.
in order to be a venture fund.
Yeah.
Like just talk about it and just be like, hey, this is all the boring stuff. I'm sorry, I'm more interesting than this. But yeah, it's not a bad idea. I like
Yeah.
that idea.
Yeah. Kudos. Yeah, definitely. Would love to help as well if you uh, want some push there. But couple of questions which uh, I think I'll get some more better answers than what you did, which is when did you feel the most challenged in your entire 12 plus years of building a career as a VC? You build, your startup and you tried many things. When was like this feels like so difficult for me to like even go
Okay,
to the next
so
step?
here I'll give you. I think all founders, and I'm gonna lump me in the bucket, and I don't give me all like the level of credit that most founders should have, but I did found Boost VC, and all founders are in a constant state of two things. Okay, you're either building conviction or
Hmm.
you're executing on a strategy.
Mm.
The hardest part is when your strategy isn't working. And so I'll give you like my example of this, where I was the lowest with Boost VC was fundraising. And my strategy of it was 2015, and I was raising it was our first institutional fund, and I was raising a crypto VR fund. Okay, and it's hard to think of now, but in 2015, no one wanted crypto, and no one wanted
Nobody
VR.
knows it.
No one wanted either of those things. And now it would have been called a metaverse fund, probably something like that. But like, no one wanted either of those things. And but in 2015, there wasn't a word for it. There wasn't like no one had like articulated these things.
Right.
And I had gone into a meeting, and I won't say who it was with, but it was with an endowment. I was on the East Coast. I was in Boston, and after 10 minutes of me talking to them, they left the room. And so I was like, and so the state of Boost VC was we had 2 weeks of money left to pay our team.
Wow.
I was in Boston, like on a sort of like, I wanted to fundraise, and like we had started, we had fundraised, but not nearly enough to be able to pay the bills. And so I'm in this like spot where it's basically like, I don't know how this is going to go. And so I go back to my hotel room after this meeting, knowing that I got like destroyed, like it didn't work, right? And I'm like, in those moments, you're like, I'm doing something wrong. But really the best way to think about it is control what you can control. And it's like, hey, the only thing I can control is them knowing what I do. And what I've learned, and by the way, this was after like, crying on the floor or whatever I was doing to like come back real from the conversation. But but what I was like, the only thing, like, the only way I've had good conversations is if people are already interested in crypto or VR. And this was also a part of being spurred by my grandfather, who one of my favorite parts of the book is actually he's asking me about this is more light on this, but about fundraising. I was like, God, it's been so hard. I've met with 300 people, blah, blah, blah. And he goes, maybe you're doing it wrong. Like this is the maybe you're doing it wrong moment, right? Like I'm in the midst of like chaos, and maybe I'm doing it wrong. And so I changed it. And what I did was, with my next meeting, was I said, look, this won't be a productive investment meeting unless you're already interested in crypto or virtual reality. And that was my opening line. What it does by sort of saying like, it's basically saying, are you interested in these things? Because otherwise this meeting is me educating you, and that's fine. But like, I'm looking for money.
Like, you only have like 2 weeks.
Yeah, I'm here for this, right? And so immediately what it did was it locked them into saying like, hey, we're interested. You're here because we're interested in Bitcoin. Like, we want to learn more. We have a bunch of questions for you. Like, and so suddenly they're locked in and they're asking questions. Given I might have already had a better relationship with them, but I hadn't met them in person. So I actually didn't have a better relationship with them. And so that like, for me, that was sort of the hardest moment that I pinpoint, is like the pressure was on me and my strategy wasn't working. And there are a lot of reasons for that. Like, looking back, I'm naive. I didn't like looking back. Hopefully I always think my past is naive. But that was a hard moment. And then I think the most important thing to ask yourself in those moments, though, is like knowing that this is still the direction you want to go, right? Like, not about that hit I took. It's about like, I'm still willing to keep going for what I am attempting to accomplish. Like, I think that I am good at this.
Right.
I need to give myself a shot to show, and I have to have the team survive long enough for
Mm,
me to prove that we are good at this.
mm.
Um, and that's that was a hard time. So
Wow. Thanks for sharing that. Thanks for being very transparent. And I'm sure, like, you came out stronger and like even like a lot better in a way, right?
well, my
And more
partners.
wiser.
Yeah, well, yeah, maybe. I don't, but let's not get me wise yet. But I will say the next time we went out to fundraise, so that fundraise, so we that ended up that next meeting actually ended up being our anchor LP. And I'm
Mm,
not gonna say that's gonna work every time. That was sort of a storybook ending to my story,
right.
um, but it was still a long time coming. Like we had to figure out how to cover the bills for a little bit. Like it wasn't a perfect system, but we figured it out.
Right. Right.
Um, but the next time we went out to fundraise, the thing that we learned was my partner made sure that we practiced the pitch
Mm,
with each other, like, I don't know, 40, 50 times before, like
wow.
every day we were doing these pitch practices, because fundraising at the end of the day is a lot like cheating on a test, right? Like, all the questions that are going to be asked. And
Right.
so it's about you
It's a great
figuring out what
analogy.
the best answer is,
Right.
and headed in the direction that you feel comfortable talking about.
And more
And
authentically, right? I feel like more authentically addressing those questions. If there is like
yeah,
nothing you can do, there's nothing you can do, right, about it.
so like but you need to know that that question is coming to be authentic in that moment. So
Right.
you need to be so well prepared that you are authentic about it, right? Like you're not
Right.
memorizing. The people who read off the screen, that's the less captivating pitch. I need
Right.
them to know why these things aren't things. Like I
Right.
oh, the other thing I learned about fundraising, and this is good for you if you're ever fundraising or anyone,
Yeah.
no one cares how.
Mm.
We as builders, we love how we do everything differently. How feels like the differentiating factor, and it
Yep.
is. But for the investor, it's not. It
Mm.
doesn't matter. How you're thinking about it differently does matter. So like
Mm.
but I don't care about your feature set. I don't care about, like, it's one of these things where, yeah, and my LPs completely the same. I realized no one cared how. I think I wrote about it
Mm.
in the book, but maybe not.
That's awesome. Uh, oh man, I think this is the longest podcast ever I recorded the episode, and this has been like I'm thoroughly like learning and enjoying the conversation. A couple of so I do this thing called rapid fire five, where I just like blast five questions to you. That's like the end
Awesome.
of
I
end of
call it
this.
lightning round on my podcast. So
Yeah, something like lightning rounds, right? So, one crazy founder story that you want to share.
one crazy founder story that I want to
Crazy, weird, like oh my god, this I never have experienced such an incredible or crazier story.
let's see here. Crazy founder story that I want to share. For the sake of time, I'll pick a fun one. I I always think, well, I guess I could tell the story in a long way too, but the I negotiated the terms of a deal based off of playing Super Smash Brothers with them.
Wow.
So it was a company called Make School, Jeremy Rossman and Ashutosh. They're fantastic. And they were high energy. They were doing this amazing thing. They were going to change the way that, like, people learn to develop. And it ended up being a school and it was actually became an accredited university
Hmm.
at one point. And before that, they were just doing this sort of camp where kids would learn how to build mobile apps.
Right.
And I was like, what video games do you play? It feels like a relevant question if
Right.
you're going to be video games, right? And I was like, mine's Super Smash Brothers. They're like, oh, we've been playing so much Super Smash at the apartment, like, like we're talking about it. I was like, okay, I will invest, but I will invest this much if I beat you, and I will invest this much if you beat me. And uh, not to brag, but I destroyed them.
Wow.
Uh, they like practiced all summer and like got all week, and I hadn't played it in a little while. But my partner we do play Super Smash Brothers for the N64. So whenever people play that, like, we are very good at it. So
Awesome.
that's a fun random story. That's fun.
Awesome. Yeah, that's so fun. I can't imagine that itself. That feels like a bit from the HBO show Silicon Valley. It feels like that, right? Like,
I actually think finding fun ways to do deals like that. I do it every once in a while. I forget what the one of the most recent deals that we did is a fitness app, a fitness thing, and I said, "How many push-ups can you do?" And
wow,
he said, "No, 100." I think what he said was 130,
that's a lot.
no, 150. And
Wow.
first off, I was like, that's a lot of push-ups. I like, if you do 100, he said, if I do that many push-ups, will you invest? And I said, 100%. I was pretty much there anyway, but like 100%. You do that, I will invest. And Boost will invest. And he sent me a video the next day of him doing
Wow.
113 push-ups in a row,
Oh man, so close.
which, for the record, more than 100 push-ups is ridiculous. And I knew how ridiculous that was. I remember in high school, no one could do more than 80. And it was like that.
Yeah.
And that was like the most fit people. So I was just like blown away that he even got there. And so we still did
Love that. Uh, Switching gears a little bit, that's like the fun part. Now let's talk about uh, what is the biggest miss in Boost VC's history, in terms of investing. Like, what did you miss a deal?
Oh, dude. I mean, this is why I am so strong on it's important to be high conviction, not stubborn, because I got stubborn about Bitcoin. So we missed on Ethereum, and we were
Hmm.
the fund that should have owned all of it, basically. Like, we were the only shop in town basically doing crypto. And so when they
Oh,
did their crowd sale, everyone in our office individually, not our team, well, maybe yes, some people on our team, I didn't, but we used to provide housing and office space, and all the companies were in the office, and they're all like, the only story that was on Boost VC television was the Ethereum
hmm.
crowd sale. And so every single person was participating with some amount of money. And if you had bought one Bitcoin worth, which one Bitcoin at that time was about $200, so it was 200
Wow.
bucks worth, you would end up with 2,000 Ethereum. 2,000 Ethereum today is worth like 3 million bucks. So like,
Wow.
if you held to today, it would be the best investment ever. So my answer on miss is, also, if you're in this business long enough, that's the one that I feel like, hey, if I wasn't so stubborn, we would have done this no matter what.
Hmm.
Because enough people were talking about it. We knew enough about it. We knew how to participate. Few people
Right.
knew how to participate.
Hmm.
Um, we would have done this, right? Like, if I had an open mind to the idea.
Right.
That one we should have done. There are a lot
Hmm.
of deals we missed in general for numerous different reasons. I've missed random things for not pushing hard enough, whatever. That was one that was in our wheelhouse that we should have just like I
Right.
missed, like, Brian Armstrong referred me a company that was doing coupons on the internet, and it just
Hmm.
wasn't crypto. And so I was like, hey, like, you guys are amazing, but like, we're focused on Bitcoin right now. And it was Honey, which ended up being bought for $4 billion.
Wow.
And I remember meeting them and being like, they're great founders. Brian, thank you for sending these to me, but they're not doing Bitcoin, so I can't do it right now. And
Wow.
it's one of those, you know, be open. Don't be stubborn. Be
Right.
open.
So now that you're in knee deep into deep tech, pun intended, uh, are you open to like invest in other ideas that excite you?
So the things that excite me normally are people. And so what we do is we spend all of our time in these weird technologies because we have a higher percentage chance of those people to be there. If I
Hmm.
spend 100% of my time talking to space companies, I know that they're doing space, and if I like someone, I'll be able to do that deal. Um, so we spend a
Hmm.
lot of time in deep tech for that purpose. So it's not. So my answer is, yeah. I love. I mean,
Lovely.
my I've done what's the most, like, one of my best performing companies. I mean, analytics was Amplitude,
Hmm.
construction software was PlanGrid. Benchling was life sciences. Coinbase was crypto, but that's just fintech. Wave Mobile Money was fintech. Polychain was a fund that Boost VC backed, and we made a bunch of money on it. And then, just going down the list, it's like you just want
Yeah.
great people doing interesting things, and you just want to be a part of it and service the founders however best we can.
Yeah, love that. This is more of like a personal question. Other than your father and your grandfather, who's your favorite VC in tech?
Man, that's an amazing question. An amazing question. Look, I like from
I didn't
my
mean to
perspective.
put you on spot, but I just like,
It's an amazing question. I want to answer it, and the reason is the same reason that I feel uh, like a lot of what Boost VC does, like one of our actual cult values at Boost VC is like we give people a shot, and so we like being the first check. That's our goal is to be the first check. It's not to follow; it's to be the first check.
right.
And so thinking back, who are the VCs or investors who took a chance on me and who gave me my real first shot, other than obviously my family. And the two that are popping up to the surface, one I will eternally be indebted to because they were the first institution to ever support me. It's a guy named Shamez Kanji, who works at Devonshire Partners, and he gave us a shot at Boost VC. And I will he asked me to do something, I'll do it, like whatever it is. It literally doesn't matter. Like he has
Right.
infinite requests. He could stop investing in Boost VC. He will always be my favorite person on the planet because he gave me my shot. The other is Mark Andreessen. And one of the reasons that Mark Andreessen is on this list is he was the last data point I needed to go all in on being focused on Bitcoin. And it was in an email conversation. I searched through my emails recently and got it. And it was like basically
Wow.
just this conversation where I was trying to fundraise for this fund. And he's like, well, you're doing the Bitcoin stuff, right? And he's like, is it fully focused on Bitcoin? And I was like, now it is. Yes, we are going to go all Bitcoin. Are you interested? And like, that was the moment that I was like, hey, it was and then on the other side, he's made himself very available
Right.
at certain times when I've needed assistance. And then he's spoken at a couple of my events. And like, I know how valuable his time is. So
Yeah.
I've been very, very lucky to be able to work with some
Mark
incredible.
Andreessen is like he's a legend. So
Yeah.
so
And the other person on the Andrews and Horowitz team ended up is Chris Dixon, who I just think is one of the best thinkers.
yeah.
He's such a deep thinker that he would also be on my list. So
Yeah.
those and I I have I do have a lot of VCs I love, but if you're gonna ask me who my favorites are, I have to go there because it was
Like
just
your Mount Rushmore of your VC,
they were so important to me in my development. So I would say those would be the ones.
Awesome. Who are you most bullish on, like the founder side, like right now?
I mean, broadly speaking or specifics? So broadly
Right
speaking,
off
like
your mind, like in recent days, this is the founder, like, I'm very bullish on.
I mean, Brian Armstrong from Coinbase. I think he's an assassin. He's just locked in. It's going to be amazing. But if we're talking about more earlier stage startups, one of the most fun things that that I did. So I'll tell this in a very specific way, which is Coinbase's cap table was I was one of the seed investors. I think I was the first check other than YC, but that's besides the point.
Mhm.
So was me, and then Fred Wilson from USV did the Series A,
Mm-hmm.
and then Andreessen Horowitz did the Series B. Recently, Radiant, which does nuclear fission, portable nuclear fission systems, raised from Boost VC, me, from Fred Wilson at Union Square,
Same pattern.
and Andreessen Horowitz. And so I believe, we'll see, but I said yes to the founder in about 15 minutes. I
Wow.
thought Doug Bernauer from Radiant was incredible.
Awesome.
I mean, my other I think it's a good idea to talk about who like the people who are these. I have some incredible partners, people I'm partnered with,
Right.
but I can verifiably say also the person I'm sad that we sold the company. There is a founder named Max Hout, who I have known for 15 years. I was on his board at Livestream, and then he sold that company. And then I was lucky enough to be able to invest in Launcher, which was a space rocket company.
Wow.
And then we took a big bet, and recently it sold, and I'm sad because I ended up taking a board seat, and I absolutely loved being a part of the day-to-day. And so it was one of these, like, it was a talk about a founder who I have like absolute trust in, and I feel like that's a partnership that I will strive for every partnership I take on from now on. That would be the other one.
Awesome. We'll definitely include all the shout outs in the show notes. Last question. You asked this question, to your grandfather in the book. So I want to ask you, what's the favorite investment you ever made? Please don't tell Coinbase. I am apart from that.
The funny thing is, I always, when you ask VCs this, it is funny how often it is their best investment. But my grandpa's was a good one. It was Measure X. He always loved it because he would go around the board meetings. We're always in like Scotland or Japan or whatever.
Right.
But for me, I think I've had a few defining investments, and if I'm going to go like hard on where I have defined my convictions
Right.
to the extreme, which I think is always pushing yourself, is Launcher with Max. I bet the farm a little bit on Max personally and through Boost, and I went because I just have so much trust in how he operates, and I think that it pushed me as a VC to step in and understand what he's going through, and I feel like it made me a better investor. I think other than like the successful deals I've done where I was actually, Coinbase, I look back through and like, yeah, I was incredibly useful, I think, to Coinbase, Amplitude, Benchling, like year 1 and 2. But like, I'm at year 5 with Max, and I still feel like I've been able to sort of level up, and I'm still learning, and I'm still getting into it. And I still have information that I've gleaned from it that is like going to pay dividends for a very, very long time.
Nice.
Also, when the partnership essentially ends, I'm still friends with him, which is incredible. But I was sad when it happened. Not sad, like I'm happy we did what was right for everyone. Like everyone, we did what was right in the moment. But I'm sad because I believe there was still more to be learned, and there was still more to push. And but it was the best. It was the best thing for the company. I'm absolutely obsessed that they ended up at Vast, and they're building the biggest space station that will ever exist. They recognized how talented Max and his team was, which was which is the most important thing. But that's one of the ones where I would say it's my favorite. It wasn't necessarily on multiples the best financial return. It was fine, like we made money, but the thing that was me taking a real shot, and I feel very, very proud that I did it. So it's probably my proudest investment I've made.
Adam, I think we've hit a record. in at least in my podcast, like this has been like the longest and the most high value packed conversation I ever had in my podcast history. So I genuinely, bottom of my heart, like I genuinely want to appreciate you for the time. And the one thing I want to just mention you is that you're one of the very authentic, like I just met you today, right? We never talked before, and you're one of the most authentic people, at least in this conversation. I just
I
observed that.
appreciate that.
And yeah, man, I just loved every answer. It's so deep, it's so well thought out, it's so like you're more of like a servant leader in the VC space, which I think I appreciate. And
Someone said servant leader to me, and I looked that up and I tried to understand what it was. And I like it. I
yeah,
like that concept, and I think that's hey, I'm not perfect, but like I work hard for the companies we work for, and I try to be useful wherever I can. And I think that that is sort of the core guiding light of servant leader in this capacity. So yes, I agree. So thank you, but
no,
thank you for
yeah,
telling me
appreciate.
that
And thanks for the
a
folks.
lot.
Any last thoughts before we wrap up?
Uh, if you're starting anything interesting, email me, Adam at boost.vc. Anyone who's listening, I would love to hear why you're starting your journey, and I would love to help point you in the right direction if that's possible. So, yeah, I mean, if you're hoping to solve important problems, please reach out to Boost.
Awesome. Yeah, we'll put every link and your email ID in the show notes. But this has been great. I'm grateful for you for actually giving me the shot that I just cold emailed you or DM'd you and you just said let's do it. So
It's
I
the,
appreciate you for
it's the
doing this.
best. It's the best. Well,
Yeah.
Sharath, good luck. Thank you very much. And hey, you're amazing at asking questions.
Thank you. Appreciate it. And cheers, folks, for listening.